Che ci abbiamo molti.
Fundamentally, we're people who are obsessed and love bodies, and we love making choreography. We're very, very passionate about our art form. I think that, the concept tracking that I've been doing with Phil Barnard has been really a very intimate process, and it's kind of exposed things about the way in which I think about developing ideas over a long period of time that I've always kept to myself. I think it's been really revealing to me having these conversations where you actually just realise where an idea starts.
For a number of productions now, we've started about 18 months out exploring what the seeds of an idea for a new choreographic creation look like, and to chart how they evolve in the period that leads up to moving into the studio, and then to see how they change once he gets into the studio. So the technique now is referred to as process and concept tracking. So we're trying to actually track in particular categories how his thinking is evolving in relation to the core ideas, what kind of methods he's thinking of using or proving successful in the studio, what kinds of imagery and sources of information he's using in his foraging for ideas, how the constraints of a production affect his thinking. So if he's producing something on a big stage, how's that going to be different from producing something on a small stage?
This concept tracking has really allowed me to understand some of the mechanics of that. Actually, when is it important to understand when the design constraints affect perhaps some of the ways in which you're going to work with structural form in the rehearsal process? When is it that all of a sudden two ideas which were seemingly opposed or are very different parts of understanding coalesce to be able to grow into something that then becomes the centre of the thing that you're working on? And I think the only way you can do that is to look at what some of those decisions are over time with some kind of methodology, with some kind of filter.
Wayne's involved in an awful lot of different collaborations in any particular production, very often. Scenography, musicians, composers, and of course there's us around in the background as well as any other artistic inspiration that he might have for that particular piece. Which means that an awful lot is going on in the context of any given making process. And that is indeed quite challenging to unpack what the respective influences are.
He's allowed us to have a framework in which we can understand these very rich and diverse contrasting expectations and filters, and help us just kind of reduce them down to the nub and the essence, that you can start to track ideas and where ideas grow, where ideas are inhibited perhaps, and then are taken up later on, where ideas cross-pollinate between pieces that are maybe 3 or 4 years apart. So the concept tracking has not just been about one discrete process, but it's been 4 or 5 processes which have had very, very different factors. And that objectivity with expert questioning, because I think, it's not to be underestimated, the kind of the expertise that Phil Barnard brings to the type of questions that he asks have been really phenomenal in me understanding my own process. But more than that, I felt that while I've been doing those interviews, I get a richness in an exchange of consolidating or understanding my own ideas as they come.
One of the strong arguments for doing process and concept tracking in the way in which we've been doing it, systematic sampling over time, is that we only really often know about what's gone through an artist's mind, either through some post hoc analysis of their notes or through interviews that are given to journalists or educationists. And they're clinicised versions of what actually happened, because they're doing it in a particular communicative register in which they give a very clear explanation of why it is that artwork is the way it is, whereas how they got there may be a lot muddier. And the process and concept tracking technique enables us to actually sift through the layers of mud and see what's involved in terms of all of the different components that come in and go out and get left and put aside and sometimes come back in again. We can see that dynamic exposed.
Where nobody's making any decision or comment about the nature of the decision, or they're not making any judgment about the decision, but they're opening up more fertile options for you to think about what it is that you're doing. And I think that it's been one of the best gifts that I've had in this whole process working with scientists.